Welcome to the Lead Change podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Mulcahey. I'm an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon with a huge interest in contributing to the growth and development of leaders. On this podcast, we will share stories from physicians in various medical specialties and those in roles that support the advancement of medicine to understand the skills necessary to be an effective leader. We'll celebrate their success and hear about strategies to overcome hurdles. We will also highlight some of the unique challenges faced by women in medicine who are interested in pursuing leadership positions and the importance of mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship in achieving and being successful in those roles. Let's work together, build on shared experiences, learn from those before us, and use these lessons to propel us forward in our career. Let's lead change. Welcome, everyone, to the Lead Change podcast. We are celebrating the first episode of the second season. I am hugely honored to have my very good friends and sports medicine colleagues, Drs. Logan and Ashley Bassett, on the podcast. Dr. Logan is a board-certified, fellowship-trained orthopedic surgeon specializing in complex knee and shoulder surgery at Colorado Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, which is known as Cosmo, located in Denver, Colorado. She's a team physician for the Men's USA Box Lacrosse National Team, U.S. Ski and Snowboard, and currently serves as on the board of directors for the Schill Foundation. After her transition from physical therapy training, Dr. Logan attended Tufts University School of Medicine in Boston, where she earned multiple clinical and research awards while simultaneously earning her Master's of Business Administration. Dr. Logan stayed in Boston, where she completed the Harvard Combined Orthopedic Residency Program. Following residency, Dr. Logan completed her sports medicine fellowship at the Steadman Philippon Research Institute and the Steadman Clinic in Vail, Colorado. Dr. Ashley Bassett is a board-certified, fellowship-trained orthopedic surgeon specializing in sports medicine and the surgical treatment of shoulder, elbow, and knee injuries. Dr. Bassett received her medical degree from Rutgers University, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, where she was elected to the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society and Gold Humanism Honor Society. Following medical school, Dr. Bassett completed her residency in orthopedic surgery at the Harvard Combined Orthopedic Residency Program. She then completed a fellowship in sports medicine at the Rothman Orthopedic Institute at Thomas Jefferson University. She currently serves as the director of the Women's Sports Medicine Center at the Orthopedic Institute of New Jersey. She is an active member of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine. Dr. Bassett serves as the head team physician for Sussex County Community College and provides sideline medical coverage for many local high schools across Sussex and Morris counties. Additionally, Drs. Logan and Bassett co-host a very popular educational podcast series titled the Sports Docs Podcast, which explores cutting-edge developments in the field of sports medicine. So I have known Catherine and Ashley for many years, and we have all worked together in numerous capacities through the Orthopedic Sports Medicine Societies in the United States. I've really, really enjoyed working with them on several different projects. Catherine and Ashley were both hugely helpful also in getting my podcast started. They gave me lots of advice about platforms for taping, editing, and releasing the episodes, and I am so grateful for their advice and insight. I'm really looking forward to having Catherine and Ashley share some of the lessons they've learned through their leadership roles, including as co-hosts of their very successful podcast. Catherine and Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you,
Mary.
Yeah, we're super pumped to be here. So thanks so much, Mary, for having us.
Yeah, really excited. My pleasure. I'm so excited to have this discussion with you guys. So before we really dive into kind of your leadership experience, can you both share with us a little bit about your clinical practice, including your main interests and expertise? Catherine, let's start with you.
Sure. So very traditional, like sports medicine practice in the sense that it's really all sports medicine. I'm not doing any like trauma call at this point. So it's basically a clinical practice with focus on shoulder, knee, and elbow. And then on like the unique side, we have like a little satellite in a place called Viking Elite Performance. And so within Viking, we do a lot of exercise testing and like biometric sort of testing. And then we just started pairing exercise before PRP to like increase platelet count. So we're doing some like neat kind of things within the performance space too.
Very cool. I did not know all of that. And it's awesome to bring your sort of physical therapy and orthopedic sports medicine worlds together. Ashley, tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yeah, so very similar to Catherine's. I've been at the Orthopedic Institute of New Jersey since I left fellowship. So it's going to be 7 years this September. Feels like it's just flown by. I do shoulder, elbow, and knee surgery. In terms of types of surgery I do, in addition to the bread and butter, I typically handle like the osteotomies in my practice, as well as the cartilage restoration as well too. So in addition, similar to Catherine, no trauma call. I feel like we're very lucky in that regard. So just a pure sports practice, really enjoy what I do.
That is awesome that neither of you have to take trauma call. Fantastic. I'm in an academic setting at a level 1 trauma center. So I
Yeah.
do have to take trauma call, but it's not that bad. And our residents are excellent. But it's very interesting to hear the different practice types and how everything is set up.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, you previously served as head team physician for the Premier Lacrosse League, and you now serve as team physician for the USA men's lacrosse team. So, congratulations. That is awesome. So, how did you really first become interested in serving in this type of role? And what are some of your responsibilities with the men's USA lacrosse team?
Sure. So as part of the fellowship at Stedman, we get introduced to being team physicians for USC at snowboard. And so during that process, I was doing this event that doesn't exist anymore that was called the Burton US Open. So it was this big snowboard event that was amazing. That was a week long in Vail. And Dr. Hackett would bring me back to serve as one of the physicians on the half pipe at the medical. I spent the week there, and it was just kind of fell in love with it as far as being there kind of 24/7 and just dealing with event kind of medicine. I really loved it. And there was some connections between when the PLL started in 2019. When that week started, there was some overlap with people who were on the operations side for doing that Burton event. So when they were looking for a physician to sort of take that leadership role, my name got thrown in the hat. And I was really lucky to be able to get that as a younger physician. And, honestly, Mary, I just loved it so much. And the only reason I eventually sort of said, all right, I've got to step back from this role and go into USA was the travel was just a ton. It was so many weekends all summer long. And as much as I loved it, I loved being around for my kids' sports more. And so with USA, it's very similar sort of team coverage, and the travel burden is a lot less. So that was really the main impetus for the switch.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think a really important component and helpful for people to understand, being a team physician is fantastic. And there's so many benefits. And I think we all love that different aspects of that. But then at certain levels, there is a lot of travel associated with it. And you have to take that into account with your practice, with your family, with other events in your community. And so very interesting to hear kind of how that evolved for you, and awesome to see too how the connection to fellowship then leads to these other opportunities in your practice and your career.
Sure.
So fantastic. Ashley, so you previously served as team physician for USA Gymnastics, and I'm curious to know, how did that come about and what was your experience like serving in that role?
Yeah, so when I left fellowship, I, went into a private practice, and I love my practice and I was really excited to be here, but I definitely missed that more elite pro team coverage. I had a great fellowship where I had exposure to the four major sports teams in Philadelphia at the time. So the Phillies, the Eagles, Flyers, and the Sixers. And then when I went into private practice, I really missed that. So I actually had a bit of a different path to it than Catherine. So I was on the Emerging Leaders, or now it's the Early Career Members Committee. We were doing a nightcap event, and Jo Hannafin was on speaking about her experience with USA Rowing. And she mentioned there's always a need for physicians to get involved with the Olympic teams. And so I reached out to her, and she actually coordinated getting me involved with USA Gymnastics. And it was a really great experience. I mean, it was exactly what I was hoping for, really that high level coverage. I learned a lot from that experience in terms of working with a multidisciplinary team. It's a lot different than working with your patients in clinic, where you're communicating with their parents and maybe one athletic trainer. You're communicating with 5 athletic trainers, physical therapists, coaches, non-op docs and surgical docs. So it's a lot, and I learned a lot from it. And I did that for about 3 years, and it was a really rewarding experience. But, very similar to Catherine, it was a lot of travel, and far travel. Their tournaments are typically in the Middle East, so it was about a 16-hour flight. I was away from my family. I had just had my first daughter, Penny, who's now 3.5, and I just realized that as much as I loved this, I really needed to transition to being a bit more local, for the time being. And so I gained a lot from that experience, but I'm very happy with my decision to ultimately switch to more local coverage in the U.S. rather than continue working with USA Gymnastics.
Yeah, so no need to travel to the Middle East.
for the
6
Sussex
hour
County
flight from
games.
JFK. Yeah, no joke.
Thankfully. But I love too, that you started to touch on some of the lessons that you learned. And I wonder, Ashley, if you would just continue with that, like touch on maybe one or two specific leadership lessons that you learned by serving in that role and how that has helped you in your career now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned the multidisciplinary team. It's really helped my communication skills. I think now I'm better able to communicate. If I have a high school athlete, for example, has an ACL tear, I communicate with the athletic trainer, the physical therapist, their parents, the coaches a lot more seamlessly because of that experience with USA Gymnastics. It also taught me the benefit of having that multidisciplinary team. Everyone brings something unique to the table, right? The physical therapists that are seeing them a lot more often than I am have a lot greater knowledge in some aspects of their recovery. And I really want to tap into that and make sure that I'm, internalizing what they're saying and addressing any issues that are arising in PT because I may be seeing them every 2 to 4 weeks versus seeing them 3 times a week. The other thing I took away is the importance of individualized care. So gymnastics in particular, within gymnastics, there's several different types of gymnastics, and those athletes will have far different demands, also different injury patterns and different ability to get back to sports after they have an injury. So there's tumbling and trampoline, which is more like fractures and, ligament injuries. There's more acro. And then there's artistic gymnastics, which is the one we all think of with Simone Biles and the ones we see in the Olympics. So I would say it kind of taught me individualized care is really important. You need to know the demands of the athlete in order to properly get them back safely and in a timely manner. So I really took that away and make sure I tap into that with my patients that I'm seeing day to day.
Yeah, I love that. Those are awesome points, like really, really valuable. I think certainly as sports medicine surgeons, it's critical that we work well in the whole team and that we understand that every piece is really critical to overall care of the patient. So I love that you brought that up and really emphasized the physical therapists, the athletic trainers, the coaches, the parents, the athlete himself or herself, and then of course us. And that whole group makes up the team taking care of this patient. And so really, really important. And the individualized patient care. And I think that applies, it extends beyond just gymnastics, but also for every sport, there's different positions and recognizing that there are different demands. And so I think that's critical that we can't treat every athlete the same. And Catherine, I wonder from your perspective with lacrosse, what are some lessons that you've learned from the leadership perspective?
I think what I really loved about fellowship was like when I mentioned that snowboard event, I would spend that week under Tom Hackett and he would bring back myself and there was one other surgeon that he would bring back and just role modeling like from him, like what he did really well. And then I learned and tried to bring to like USA lacrosse as well, or PLL as well is like, that approachability and that availability. So like when I came into that league, there's roughly 260, 270 guys, would kind of run through like training camp and I would make sure I was part of every single person's physical. I wouldn't just like pass that off to like, oh yeah, I'll just sign off. Like, I'd make sure I'd sit down with them and I gave every single one of those guys my cell phone number, which at times I was like, wow, like I'm getting a lot of texts like Monday morning, but it was invaluable to sort of have that direct contact. I wasn't getting sort of like third line information. Like I just would always make sure that they knew like, I want to hear from you directly, like if you're worried about something and, make sure I'm taking really good care of you. And it was a lot of extra work, I would say, to do that, but I learned so much. And I think having that sort of direct connection earned me a lot of like credibility with the athletes and a lot of trust. And they knew like, all right, I can talk to her, I can call her at any time. And then people also start to look at you as like, like not a primary care, but even like, all right, I don't know what to do about this problem that's not orthopedics or maybe not even sports medicine, but I'm going to call her first and ask her who, maybe she can connect me with the right person. And I think that's super important is just when you're a team physician that you do play that primary care role a bit. So just being available for that, being patient for that. And like, that's part of the job. So I think a lot of times people are like, oh, it's not the cool sports injury. It's not my problem that you have a rash, but it's very much your problem. So I think just being available and being that first line so that they can come to you with anything that they need.
Yeah, such a valuable lesson. And I think really critical to take away for certainly as sports medicine surgeons and sports medicine physicians, but I think that can be broadly applicable to being a physician in general is being available for your patients. And I think one other way to sort of translate that is like being available to the physical therapist and allowing them to reach out to us directly and communicate, oh, how's this patient doing? Or they're doing well, or there's this thing I'm kind of concerned about, or they're going to be seeing you, like just giving us a heads up and allowing them to feel like they have that they can communicate directly with us too. And I think, as you just said so well, that it helps create trust and credibility, which is absolutely critical. And we want our patients to feel safe. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to know that we're there for them. And so thank you so much for bringing up that point. I think it's really important. And Ashley, you currently serve as a member of the Medical Executive Committee for a specialty surgical center. So for everyone listening, can you explain a little bit about what that role entails and what you've learned from being in that position?
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of being on the medical executive committee for about 4 years. I was about a year in, maybe year and a half before I joined. So I felt still quite new to the whole being an independent surgeon experience when I joined that. So I learned a ton from that experience. So essentially we have bi-monthly, or I guess every other month, meetings where we meet and we discuss, concerns at the surgery center. We discuss if there's been any, mishaps, any falls, any like plans for, we gotta change the HVAC. And so it's a lot of like the inner workings of what's going on kind of behind the scenes. And I think what that really taught me is that there's a lot of moving parts in order to deliver that excellent patient care, and that there has to be this alignment between the physicians and the nurses and the administrators and the staff to make sure it all runs like a well-oiled machine. It also really highlighted to me the importance of having like a voice at the table. So when I first got there, actually the head nurse, the person who's in charge of everything, really wanted to bring me on as the first female that would have been on the med exec committee. She's like, I really want your voice at the table. And she really advocated for me to be there. And I'm really grateful that she did, not only from the standpoint of a female surgeon, but also as, a younger surgeon bringing kind of newer ideas, I think, to the meeting. So, I learned a lot on the fly, because I think part of, and I think you would all agree with me on this, that part of the maybe the deficit of medical education is that we focus so much on medicine, right? So like medical school is focused so much on the science, and residency is focusing on learning to operate, which like is important, but we don't really learn like the business side, or like, patient safety and operational efficiency and any of that stuff. And I feel like I really gained that experience from this committee. I'm really happy to be a part of it. And I feel like I've really been able to contribute in a meaningful way to our surgery center growth in that regard.
Yeah. Wow. That is so awesome. And I love too that it was one of the staff people, one of the nurses or whatnot, that kind of encouraged you and helped get you on that committee. So that's huge. And that just speaks volumes to how we can all support each other, not just as physicians, but as members of this collective team. And so that is fantastic. And that you have been able to bring a very unique and valuable perspective. And so I think that's huge, is valuing all aspects of diversity from, geographic location, number of years in practice, like, maybe you've been somewhere else too, and you bring that experience. You certainly bring your experience from your fellowship and your training. And so that's really great that you have had such a wonderful experience. You've learned so much, that they have valued your involvement on the committee. And that, as you touched on too, that it's been a way for you to learn these other pieces, which I agree with you completely. And I think Catherine would too, that we don't learn anything about operational efficiency or strategy or how to do any of that. Like we learn that like in practice, or you learn it by trying to get this experience. I mean, part of my goal with this podcast is to share information about this with anyone and everyone who's listening, so that hopefully it helps them be better leaders. But I appreciate you sharing all that. I think it's so important. And Catherine, back to you. You co-founded The Unbroken Athlete with your colleague, Emily Perrin. And for anyone listening who might not be familiar with that, can you explain what The Unbroken Athlete is and who really the target audience is?
Sure. So The Unbroken Athlete it's a couple things now, but it's basically trying to bridge the gap between like the physical and the mental side of recovering from an injury, I think is the easiest way to sort of describe it. We're sort of trying to address the psychological aspects that we're totally ignoring when athletes are recovering from injury. So there's one of the reasons why I did it, because as you had sort of stated, I was a physical therapist for 7 years before I went to med school. And when I was a PT, like it just felt like such an unmet need. And I would reach out to the surgeons and say, hey, they're really struggling with this or that. And they'd be like, yeah, I don't know what to do either. And so, we just don't have a great answer. So Emily Perrin, who is mental health therapist. She and I created it together. We had interacted through USA Lacrosse. So we were basically taking care of a lot of the same athletes. And I was obviously dealing with the physical side and she was dealing with the mental side. And so we came together and started Unbroken Athlete, which initially was just very patient driven. And it was creating programming that athletes can use online to sort of help with the mental side of the recovery. We've now since expanded where we've just partnered with a couple institutions to provide like their patients. So like basically create our product for their own patients so their surgeons can give it to their patients as part of their postoperative recovery, whether it's ACL or, rotator cuff. And then also created a certification that's like a mindset specialist for physical therapists. So we go out and we train physical therapists at institutions. We just worked with like Robin West at Inova and trained 100 of her staff members on mindset recovery. So like as their, physical therapist, athletic trainers are treating their athletes, they can integrate all these tools. So like you don't need to be a mental health therapist to like, not everybody needs to go to a therapist. Some people do. Some people, are really struggling, but other times people just need some tools. And so that's sort of how the most recent iteration is. We're sort of helping it get out there through the physical therapists and athletic trainers.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so for everyone listening, right, there's a lot of information accessible online about it. It is really fantastic. And I think certainly for all of us, we have seen a huge increase in the orthopedic literature over, I guess I would say probably the past 10 years, focusing on the impact of mental health and psychological factors on recovery following various sports medicine and other orthopedic procedures. So we are recognizing this, and it has a huge, huge impact. So it's really critical, the program that you guys have created and other types, similar resources for our patients to have access to, because that it's not, we address the physical side in physical therapy, the function, the range of motion, the strength, but addressing the mental aspect is really key to getting a lot of our athletes back to playing. And so I love that you guys have done that. And I hope that it continues to grow and evolve. And I really look forward to seeing, which direction you guys take that in. So you've both served in several leadership roles, both within and outside of your institution, and you have been very actively engaged in team coverage, teaching, and research. And when you take all of that into account, I was hoping you could each share a little bit about your purpose and the motivation in all that you do, right? What is your why? What is it really at the heart of your involvement in all these different activities, and what honestly drives you? So Ashley, let's start with you.
Give me the softball, Mary. No, that's good. That's good. It's a great question. I think for me, it's probably twofold. So it's going to sound really corny, but it really is the truth. I think the reason we all go into sports medicine, orthopedics in general, is that we really want to help people. And it's a great field where you can tangibly like fix someone, right? They've like torn their ACL, you can reconstruct it. They tore their cuff or their labrum, you can repair it. And then you can get them back to doing what they love, competing at that elite level, or returning to work, or like just playing with their kids again without pain. And I think that's really important. So there's that. And then also with like the leadership side of things, I am really motivated by trying to make a broader impact, like beyond the OR in my practice. So Catherine and I have spoken about this, and a big reason of why we started our podcast was we both went into private practice, but we were both academic. And so we wanted some academic side. We wanted to still, have an educational side, or have medical students or residents, work with us or interact with them in some way, but with still maintaining our private and independent practice. And so I think some of these leadership roles have allowed me to like engage in that mentorship and that advocacy and that education while still maintaining the practice that I love and the environment and in the location that I love. So it's really allowed me to achieve balance. So I would say it's kind of twofold for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And then Catherine, what about for you? What is it that really drives you?
I think, no matter, what it is, whether it's your professional life or your personal life, like I was always raised that, you should be a good citizen in that community. So if you are a citizen of your career or your field, like you should be volunteering or participating in some way, just the same way that I should be participating in my community with like my children or, whatever it is that, your job in this world is to be a good citizen, and being a good citizen, just part of that is contributing and trying to see like what can you do to help growth. And then I would say there's a selfish side too. And that selfish side is like if you're not engaging, it's really not good for us like as individuals. So it's like if you're not sort of going to meetings, you're not continuing to stay up on the literature, like you're not learning and you're not sort of maintaining and improving your skills. And I think it's not good to not engage in the like being part of those committees, volunteering your time sort of keeps you on your toes, keeps you surrounded by people who are also pushing themselves to learn and grow. So I think that that's the selfish side, is that you're keeping your skills up by doing those things.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. How much do you give back, right? And I think the key point there, Catherine, what you made is like just being engaged in your field, in your career, in your community, all of these different ways. And you benefit personally, but also the people around you and people around all of us benefit tremendously. And so it's a way to give back. It's a way to keep learning. And so I appreciate that. I think that's a fantastic point to keep in mind. And, Ashley touched on this a little bit, how the podcast came to be, but just take one step back. So as I mentioned in the introduction, the two of you co-host the Sports Docs podcast, which is absolutely phenomenal. If anyone listening here has not listened to their podcast, you have got to check it out, please. You will love it. So Catherine, can you expand a little bit on what Ashley started to explain, just how you guys came up with the idea for the podcast, when you started it, and what kind of was the initial format?
Yeah. So as Ashley said, like, we are very academic sort of minded in private practice. And what would happen is we would discuss, you don't always have colleagues that want to discuss the recent literature, or, like these people who kind of just keep plugging along. And we would find ourselves talking about things like, hey, did you see this article? Or I'm doing this case. I have this complex case coming up. What do you think about this or that? And it was just sort of dialogue between us. And I don't know if it was just like the 2020 effect or what, but just sort of like, oh, maybe we'll try recording it. And, there really wasn't any big long-term strategy, as much as we thought it would be kind of a fun endeavor. And, again, a way to push us to stay up in the literature and interview people, make sure we're continuing to stay, with the newest innovations and the newest papers like coming out every month. So we basically, sort of just released, I think our first episode was like January 2021. Like, we were talking about, so Mary, you were our first guest.
Mm-hmm.
As part of that episode, we were talking about return to play protocols after COVID. So like, this was, a while ago now. And format wise, we have a mix of guest space like we did when we had you on. We've been doing live shows at AOSSM, and also more recently partnering with Arthrex down at their studio. But we also do little mini episodes where it's just Ashley and I. So Ashley, what did I miss? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was great. I was going to say we've come a long way since we recorded that first episode with you, Mary. I actually took a picture of us, and I was in my closet. And it was not it was the actual closet surrounded by my clothes. And we really, now we have, we have more professional-ish recording, software. We, as Catherine alluded to, we do a whole bunch of different episodes now. We do game plan episodes targeting our patients. So it's like more like simple wording, but like less medical jargon. We do overtime episodes where we record like the newest papers that are out. And as you know, Mary, we have guest episodes. And as Catherine alluded to, we're doing live episodes at the meetings at Arthrex as well, too. And it's been really exciting. So I think the most exciting thing about our podcast is there's a never ending potential. Like, there's always going to be a new article coming out or a new technique. And that's the awesome thing about sports medicine in particular. It's constantly evolving. And so we always have new content to talk about, and it's a win-win. Like, we get to learn this new content and discuss with, leading experts in the field. And then we also get to educate our community as well, too. So I think it's been really great.
And it changes our practice. Like, we review these articles together, we talk about experts, and we'll walk away and we'll be like, you know what? Like, I need to update this or that. And I mentioned at the top of the episode that, this exercise with PRP. And like, that was an article that I was like researching for one of our ideas. And I was like, I didn't know about this exercise before. The blood draw increases your platelet count. And, it changes the way you practice. So I think it's been really beneficial.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And no, it has evolved. The podcast has evolved so much in 5 years. And it was a huge honor for me to be the first guest with you guys. It was so much fun. And then being on a live episode at AOSSM, like, it's just been fantastic to see both they're actively participating and from afar how the podcast has grown. And so you touched on a lot of the different ways it's changed. Ashley, I wonder too, can you touch a little bit, say the content that you guys share on the podcast, what are your, who are your main target audiences?
Yeah. So I think, when we first started, when we were having discussions, Catherine and I, before we started the podcast, and, we were talking about cases and things like that. I guess it started with our target audience being people in orthopedics, whether that was like residents or fellows or community practice surgeons. And that still is a component of our listenership. But I would say it's actually more like physical therapists, athletic trainers, and actually some patients. And that is what led us to develop those other episodes because we realized that there was this desire for this different content. Like I had a patient come in and he was just like, oh, I know the risk of the distal biceps. I can have that nerve injury where I have numbness and then the nerve where I can't lift my wrist. And I realized he had listened to our distal biceps episode, but that wasn't meant for him. That was meant for, surgeons. And so we realized quickly we needed to kind of adjust our content. So I would say now it's kind of broad. Catherine, I don't know if you agree, but I would say it's pretty much a wide variety of people that listen to this podcast. So we try to create content for everyone.
The more we've put out, just when people will search, like, I need an osteochondral allograft, or, whatever it is, our podcast will come up high in Google. So, like, I have patients coming in all the time, like, oh, I listened to the full episode. And I'm like, it's like heavy science, but they do. And they're like, yeah, I remember Dr. Bugby said, so we have to, make sure we stay on top of it.
That is so great. But I love too how that has then led to these other episodes, which are more geared towards patients. And then you have sort of intermediate content for, physical therapists, athletic trainers who have some more like medical knowledge too. Mm-hmm. So that is great. Really appealing broadly to all these different groups, but talking about sports medicine, injuries, treatment, rehab in a variety of ways. So that is so fantastic. I love that patients are coming in asking you about Dr. Bugby. That's fantastic. He's like, for anyone listening, he's well known for osteochondral allograft in the orthopedic sports medicine world.
I think,
please.
And I learned about recently that I just thought was my probably favorite story is Erin Critch was on from Mayo. Ashley, you know what I'm going to say. And I don't think we did this when you were on. This might be something that evolves later, but we asked people like these 5 questions at the end. And one of them is like, what's your favorite OR snack? Like we'll ask surgeons that. And he told us, and basically he had I think it was the patient flew in from Maine for a procedure to see him in Minnesota and brought him his favorite OR snack because she had listened to the episode. I was like, that is amazing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was cute.
It's amazing what patients listen to and pick up.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yes.
So Catherine, you and Ashley, as we touched on a little bit, you and Ashley have had the opportunity to host live episodes of your podcast at several orthopedic related meetings, AOSSM, this Arthrex meeting as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like for you? And how have you had to kind of adjust the format and the focus of the podcast in that live setting?
I would say, over the years, like Ashley and I have a pretty dialed process where we know each other's strengths and we know I would say that we don't have the power of editing, right, in real time where we can say, don't worry, do that again. We're live. It's broadcasted on a microphone in the field house. But I do feel like Ashley and I have a great ability to just sort of roll with it. If someone sort of goes on a tangent that we weren't expecting, or if we're sort of hoping to go along a certain script or a through line, to get through a certain topic, we sort of just have a little bit of, I don't know, like a sisterly sort of sense.
Yes. I agree.
Where Ashley needs to go next or where I need to go next. I just think it's been great. It's a lot of fun. You have to pivot a bit. Sometimes John Kelly, he just starts telling jokes and he gets real silly and it's fun. That live element of just people sort of taking it off script and you just have to roll with it. I think we have a lot of fun with it and try not to get too stressed out about it, but also know how to get them back,
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with what Catherine said. I think that I think one thing we've gotten really good at is kind of trying to anticipate what people are going to answer. And I'm sure you maybe feel this way about you're a podcaster as well too. And so if they don't answer the way we think they're going to and we're recording, Catherine can edit, but she's exactly correct. If you're like, hey, what do you think about this procedure? And they're like, I don't do that procedure. It's like, all right. So it's a lot more research. I think we do a lot more research going into what kind of questions we're going to ask. We really make sure that they do X, Y, Z before we pose that question. So you want to sound as knowledgeable and prepared as possible. And as Catherine alluded to, when you're live, it just goes. Yeah. So I do feel like it's a lot more preparation goes into those episodes.
Yeah, all very good points. And I love you're just well, we got to kind of adjust based on this. You can't predict how someone's going to respond or when they're going to start telling jokes or when they might go off on a tangent. So you just have different ways to rein them back in. And so tell us about this thing.
Yes,
we got to get back on track. Ashley, so what's on the horizon for Sports Docs podcast?
Yeah. So we just keep adding new episodes. I think, Catherine and I were really realizing how exciting and how well liked the live episodes are. I think in addition to them being a little bit more relaxed and it being a little bit more off the cuff, and it being more based in like really newer literature, because it's usually discussed what's happening at that meeting, like at the Arthrex Team Physician Controversies Conference. We were talking about some of the newer techniques that were coming out and being debated in like elite level care, or at AOSSM. The way we design those episodes, we go through the program and we try to pick topics that are on the agenda that are really hot topics and address those. And so people are really liking those. So I think on the horizon, if I had to predict for end of 2026, beginning of 2027, it's probably going to be a lot more live episodes and a lot more mini episodes. Catherine and I discussing literature. We still love those 2-part guest episodes. We do, but we just think, I think a little bit more of the newer literature side, kind of hot takes and more live episodes is kind of the direction we're heading in. And I think our guests will hopefully enjoy it.
Agree. I have nothing to add there.
All right, everyone. Well, stay tuned. You heard it here first. I can't wait to see what comes at the end of 2026 going into 2027. So Catherine, turning this one to you, throughout your career, you've worked with numerous leaders within and outside of your institution. And I wonder, can you describe for us some of the lessons you've learned from leaders that you really admire? And what would you say makes them good leaders?
I would say the leaders I really admire, and that's a great question, but the folks that I'm thinking of, they are very calm always and are not reactive. So, like if something happens that maybe is, disappointing or, not what they expected, or something has changed within like the department that, things are not positive, for whatever the event or, item is. Like, I think someone who really just sort of says, like, acknowledges it and kind of takes as a little bit of a pause and really tries to look at it from different sides and then really communicates well. I think those are the things that I've come away with that I really appreciate. Like, what I think is never beneficial to anybody is people who are really reactive and people who just respond right away and start firing off emails. And I'm not. Like, I think when they're in trouble in any way, like firing off emails is generally never going to like result in anything that's helpful. So just, taking a pause, sort of collecting, thoughts from different people involved, and then really trying to communicate one-on-one in person, I think is the most helpful advice basically what I've learned over the years and try and do myself.
Yeah. Excellent point. And that's how much we can like sort of just regroup, refocus by just literally taking a few seconds. Right. And I think, I forget what the quote is, but between like something happening, there's time for you to collect yourself before you actually respond. So I love that. And Ashley, flipping this around a little bit for you, but we also work with leaders that maybe we don't quite connect with for whatever reason that is. And from any experiences you've had in that sense, like, what do you take away from those interactions, and how can you then use that to help you as you further in your career?
Yeah, I would say that throughout all of my career in terms of like medical school, training, and then even in my practice now, right? It's like dating, right? Like you date people, you realize what you like about them and you don't like about it. You take the good parts and you try to leave behind the bad parts, right? So every experience is still rewarding in some way. You're taking something from that. One thing that I think that Catherine just said that I just really want to hammer home is that remaining calm. And we've all been in the OR with that attending, or we've seen that interaction where someone loses their cool. I think a common misconception is like a leader is someone who's like on a committee, right? Or like on this committee or on med exec or a team physician for this. You're a leader in the OR. You're a leader in your clinic. You're a leader every day. You're the surgeon leader, and people are looking to you to see how you react to a problem. And when you react like that, that's not a good leader. And so people internalize that and carry that forward. So I think I've taken that from people that I don't want to do that, but it takes work. We had Winston Gwathmey on talking about mental skills training. He was awesome. People should check out that episode, talking about what to do when things go wrong in the OR. And it's like easy to sit here and say like, you should remain calm and do X, Y, Z, but it's not that easy, right? And that takes training. That takes effort and practice to make sure you're being like the best surgeon leader in that moment that you can be. And so I found that episode to be really educational for me, and I try to take that forward. And then I think the other thing is, and Mary, I think you've done, just to shout you out, a really great job with this, which is empowering other people. we've all seen people that, oh, I don't want that person to be in this committee, or I don't want this person to advance in my area because they're going to be competition to me. And that's just a really bad approach to have to things. You shouldn't be fearful of lifting someone else up, right? Water rises, all ships rise. You want to be able to help everyone else around you so that everyone can improve. And that's just better care for patients. So I think that's another thing that's really, I've taken, try to turn that around and experiences I've had and try to be better for that.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. Thank you so much. I think it's just fantastic that, I love bringing in sort of the episode with Winston too. I loved seeing that and how you respond. It's not easy. It sounds easy just sitting here talking about it. Like you said, it sounds easy, but it's not easy. And so, having some resources, learning those skills is important, and then empowering each other. I agree with you completely. I think we see it, we have several opportunities to help lift each other up, and we all benefit. We all benefit as individuals. We benefit within our sports medicine societies, and our patients certainly benefit. And so I think it's so great that you brought that up. Now, Catherine, going to you. So this one, I like to ask this question just because I'm always curious what the response is. And I'll turn this question to both of you, but I'll ask Catherine first. So Catherine, I'm curious, what would you define as your superpower? Meaning, what do you really see as one of your biggest strengths that contributes to your success and helps set you apart from other people?
I would say, my biggest strength is really my path, like linear. So like I had a very different path. So I've been very much someone who's not the top of the food chain, for a lot of my career, someone who was the physical therapist being yelled at by the surgeon, or I waited table, bartended all the way even through med school. So like the person who's like in the service industry is not treated well. So I think for me, that has really been my superpower, because I think it's given me two things. One is like my experience in the restaurant industry, like, you always like, there's a saying that like, about marrying the ketchups, like, taking all the different ketchup bottles and making them all full by, whatever, like there's always something to do is like the point. And so if you are at the clinic and you're like, oh, this patient didn't show up, or, whatever, like, I think I just have that mentality of there's always something to do, like. So I think that has fueled a lot for me and really helped me as a surgeon. And I think that other piece about, being a physical therapist before, being on the receiving end of someone who's not very kind or respectful to me, whether it's a patient or a surgeon, I think about that a lot. And I have really good relationships with the physical therapists that I work with and the staff. So I think that's really, those experiences, it made me have a longer path, but I think it makes me very aware of, how lucky we are to be in the position that we are in, and that, we should keep everyone on that team, like, is such a huge part of what we get to do. So just that served me well.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I didn't know about even your experience in like the service industry and all that. But I think the key point there is like all these different perspectives that you bring and how much it helps in practice now. And I agree with you completely that it's so important that I tell patients all the time, the surgery is a teeny tiny part of getting you better, but that your I say, please tell your physical therapist, thank you from me too, that this is like definitely a team approach to taking care of you. And so I appreciate you really emphasizing the importance of that. And then Ashley, I'll turn it over to you. What would you define as your superpower?
Before I go into my superpower, which really is an underwhelming superpower, but I do have to say, Catherine kind of alluded to it, but she's being humble. Like, I do feel like she juggles a bajillion things. And I think that has also made me better able to kind of push myself. Like, you think like there's not enough time in the day. We all have the same 24 hours. And like this podcast, like when we first took it on, it was like we were doing like one episode every other month, right? And now we do weekly episodes, right? You just kind of keep pushing yourself and you be amazed at what you can handle. And I do feel like Catherine juggles a lot of things. That's really motivated me to take on more. And I feel like that's been a really positive experience. So thank you, Catherine. You're too humble. And then it's not really superpower, but again, to kind of piggyback on the experience, like whenever I talk to medical students or like early residents about like their journey in life, I always just tell people like every step of the way I was wrong. I was like, I'm a biochemist. And then I was like, I hate the lab. What am I going to do? I was like with mice running people. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I switched to medicine. I was like, I'm going to be a cardiologist. And like, that was wrong. And then I said I was going to be a hand surgeon. And like, that was wrong. So like every step of the way, I was wrong, but I let myself revert, adjust course, right? And I think a lot of people are too scared to do that. They're like, no, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. And then they get to, I think, Catherine, it was in your year, second year, third year of residency, and then they realize, I don't want to do this, and then they drop out, right? You have to let your experiences guide you. You have to it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a mistake, and you have to use that to guide you. And I think for better or worse, I've been wrong a lot. And I think that led me into a career that I really, really love. And I don't know that I would have gotten here if I wasn't flexible or willing to accept that I was wrong and change my course, which is uncomfortable in the moment, but I think it's really important.
Yeah. I think
it's so critical to say, like, things are going to work out the way they're supposed to, 100%. That, like, you may have something in your mind, but then another door opens, an opportunity presents itself. You work with a great faculty member who did X, Y, or Z, and then you say, oh, wow, like, I should consider this field. And so I think it's really important, as you said, just be open and let things kind of fall into place. We don't, although as surgeons, we want to have control over everything. We can't. And in some ways that's good, that they will evolve, they will happen, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be. So I want to close this out with 3 questions that I like to ask all of my guests. And I'll go back and forth between the two of you. I'll start with one, then we can go on to the next point. But if you feel like you want to add to the question, please do as well. So I'll start with the first question for Catherine. So this podcast is Lead Change. And I wonder, what does lead change mean to you?
So I think, when I hear that, it's sort of just like putting, as a leader, you have to put your take on, how you want to see things evolve. And I don't even know if I would say, I think of the word evolve more than change, just that you're not like, change sometimes is like you're totally reverting something to something totally different and you're so off course. But I think it's like, when I hear it, it's like making your little adjustments to make progress and make things better.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Nobody has ever said that. I love that way of thinking about it, and thinking that you're making these small adjustments, right, as we go along. Ashley, I'm going to pose the second question to you. So have you read any leadership books that you have found to be particularly impactful or meaningful to you?
So disclosure, when I have fun time to read, I'm usually reading I just read Project Hail Mary, which was really great. Everyone should check that out. More like leisure books. However, the book that I really did like, and I think you met her with me at the Inspire conference, was by Sindra Kampoff, Beyond Grit.
Yeah.
And essentially it was talking a lot about like that mindset skills training, but like that it's not about working harder. It's really about working smarter, not only like in medicine, but athletics and leadership, and the importance of grit, that it requires that purpose and that resilience and that self-awareness. And giving yourself some grace and some compassion as well too when you do make mistakes. And again, kind of alluding to what I said earlier, being able to revert course and kind of change your path if it need be. And so I really found that book really rewarding. I really liked hearing her speak at the Inspire conference. So that would probably be my favorite currently.
Yeah, she was fantastic. She's had so much energy, and she got this whole room engaged and participating in all these activities. And her book really is wonderful. Definitely check that out. And she is on an earlier episode of the podcast, so please listen to that too. Like, we talk a lot about the book, and she was just fantastic. So much fun to have on the podcast too. So Catherine, I'll turn the last question to you. Do you have any favorite quotes?
I feel like my quotes change like a lot, so I can't say that there's like one quote. I'd be lying if there's like one quote that really like drives. I will say it's not a quote, but it's more of a tack on, it's like a concept, if that's okay. And so there's, in the book that I like, that's more leadership / hospitality, it's called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's about the restaurant industry. I love the restaurant industry. And there's this concept of dream weaving. And so I think about that a lot throughout my day. So dream weaving is a patient comes in, and in your mind, you're trying to think of, how can I make this special? Or like, your staff member comes in and they're doing something, how can I make this sort of special for them? So our whole staff read this book, and so they employ this concept way more than I do. And we have like a little dream weaving, like petty cash. So say like someone comes in and they mention, oh my God, I tore my ACL. I'm also getting married, all this sort of stuff. The appointment, they come in like after they've had their wedding, like they'll have like a mini bottle of champagne and this like card, and they'll do a whole thing. And or they had someone we knew was like, their whole surgery is like, they wanted to go to Coachella. And like, she was like, I need to be ready for Coachella. And like when he walked in clinic, I guess I don't know, there was like a big Justin Bieber set. So they like played Bieber as like he was walking in. So anyway, I think the thing I sort of like live by and like the quote in sort of my mind is more of a concept. And it's just like, how can we be dream leaving? So I don't know. It's a very roundabout answer for you.
Yeah, no, but that's fantastic. I think so important, right? We're seeing patients at a stressful time, and that this has a huge impact on their lives. And so I love that you and your team are looking for ways to make it still a positive experience for them. Yeah, and fun. Exactly. So, Catherine and Ashley, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been an enormous pleasure to have you here. I've really enjoyed every minute of this conversation, and I could talk to you guys easily for another hour. I appreciate you sharing some of the many leadership lessons you've learned from your various leadership roles. And on a very personal note, thank you again, both of you, for all of your advice as I was getting my podcast started. You both helped me tremendously. I wish you huge amounts of continued success with the Sports Docs podcast and all of your other endeavors. And I look forward to many more opportunities to collaborate with both of you.
Thanks. And congrats to you. Great job.
Thank you so much. Celebrating the first episode of the second season. Thank you guys very, very much. And I know that I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Bye.